Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into Stuart Diamond's negotiation masterclass.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote the book Getting More,
Right.
and it's really shifted my thinking about how to approach like any deal at all.
Yeah, his work is really fascinating.
Yeah.
He blends this practical advice with a really deep understanding of human psychology.
Yeah.
So it's not just what to do, but why it works.
Totally. And
Yeah.
one of the coolest tools I think that he talks about is this idea of using standards in negotiations.
Right. And the interesting thing about these standards is they're kind of all around us.
Yeah.
They could be company policies,
Mm-hmm.
industry norms,
Right.
promises someone's made, guarantees, even something as simple as a previous statement.
Oh, wow.
Essentially anything that kind of sets a precedent or an expectation.
So how does this work in practice? How do you actually use standards?
Well, his strategy really cleverly taps into this powerful psychological principle called cognitive dissonance. People naturally dislike contradicting themselves.
Right.
They want to be consistent in their beliefs and actions.
Makes sense.
So when you highlight a standard that they've already set, whether consciously or unconsciously, it creates this internal pressure for them to align with it.
So you're holding up a mirror and saying, hey, remember when you said this?
Yeah.
Now you got to act accordingly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can make them so much more receptive to your request,
Mhm.
and it's not about manipulation.
Right.
It's appealing to their desire to be consistent.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm still trying to picture how this plays out in real life.
Okay.
Do you have any examples?
Let's say you're dealing with, that classic travel frustration,
Okay.
outrageous airline ticket change fee.
Yes.
Diamond suggests that before you get angry
Right.
and just resign yourself to paying,
Uh-huh.
ask the airline if they've ever made an exception to that policy.
Okay.
By bringing up this standard
Right.
of potential exceptions,
Right.
you might open the door to getting that fee waived yourself.
Oh, that's clever. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Do you have any other examples of how this has worked for people?
Yeah, one of Diamond's students was actually trying to get into Penn Law School
Okay.
and had been waitlisted twice.
Oh, no.
Time was running out, so he did something pretty ingenious.
Oh,
He meticulously researched the school's admissions catalog,
wow.
pulling out all the standards
Uh-huh.
they had laid out about their ideal student.
Okay.
Then he wrote this letter to the dean basically saying,
Yeah.
here's how I meet your standards, show me where I'm wrong.
Wow.
And you know what? He got accepted.
That's awesome. It's he used their own words against them.
Exactly.
So it sounds like it's not just dealing with big companies or,
No,
institutions. You could use this in your personal life too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Another student used Eddie Bauer's lifetime money-back guarantee
Oh,
from years ago
okay.
to return a bunch of clothes he no longer liked and got a full refund.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that one, but
Right.
I see how it fits.
Diamond acknowledges that some people might be uncomfortable with that level of pushing. It's
Yeah.
about finding what feels ethical and comfortable for you.
Right. It's not for everybody to be like a negotiation ninja.
Yeah.
But the point is, you can be aware of these standards and how they can be used.
Exactly.
What happens if the other side in a negotiation just won't answer your questions? What if you're trying to get them to
Yeah.
divulge their standards and they just dodge the question?
Diamond has a solution for that, too.
Oh.
He suggests reframing the question, turning answering into a standard.
Okay.
You could ask something like, is there a reason you can't answer my question about your company's policy?
Well, that's good.
By doing that, you're putting the onus back on them to justify their lack of transparency.
Right. It makes them look even worse if they don't answer.
Exactly.
But I imagine setting an audience could affect how well this works, right? If you have a big audience, people might be less likely to budge.
Diamond points out that it might not be as effective if there's a large audience.
Right.
People get more defensive when they feel like they're being put on the spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about how you can leverage existing standards.
Right.
But what if there isn't a clear standard to point to?
That's where Diamond suggests establishing new standards within the negotiation itself.
Okay.
So one of his examples involves a student who wanted a Hermes scarf gift wrapped.
Okay. A Hermes scarf. So already we're in
I see.
fancy territory.
Yeah, okay.
The sales clerk told him they don't gift wrap sale items.
Okay, I can see why the student was frustrated.
Right. But instead of accepting that the student got creative,
Okay.
he said, okay, so if I pay full price, you will wrap it.
Okay.
The clerk agreed.
Mm.
Then he said, so Hermes is charging $250 for gift wrapping.
Oh my gosh, he called them out.
And guess what? He got the gift wrapping.
Wow, he totally outmaneuvered them.
He created a new standard on the spot,
Yeah.
and they had to follow through.
I mean, that takes a certain level of confidence and quick thinking.
It does.
Yeah.
And not every situation calls for that kind of bold move.
Right.
It's about understanding the context and choosing your battles.
So finding what works for you and your personal style, but the takeaway
Yeah.
that you can establish new standards
That's
to
exactly.
strengthen your position.
Even when there's no obvious standard.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Another key concept that Diamond emphasizes is this idea of incremental negotiation.
Okay.
Instead of asking someone to jump across a chasm, you build a bridge step by step.
Okay, I love that visual.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
One of Diamond's students needed to pay a traffic ticket, but only had a personal check.
Okay.
There was a giant sign saying, "No checks accepted."
Right.
So he looked for a standard he could use to his advantage.
Okay.
On the back of the ticket, it said, "You can mail in a check."
Oh.
He used that small detail to argue his case, and he paid with his check. That's amazing how, like, an insignificant detail can become a tool
Exactly.
and used strategically.
And Diamond has seen this approach work in some pretty high-stakes situations.
Oh,
He tells this story about a multi-million-dollar merger negotiation that was moving at a glacial pace.
okay.
So he casually asked the person he was negotiating with if he wanted to grab a coffee in the next room.
What?
Yeah.
In the middle of this, like, high-stakes,
Multi-million-dollar negotiation.
the other team freaked out,
I bet.
thinking he was trying to make a side deal.
Oh my gosh.
But Diamond used this to his advantage.
Okay.
He said, "Look, you think I can brainwash him in 15 minutes? Why don't you give us something to work on while we have coffee?"
Wow.
They agreed, and Diamond and his counterpart solved the problem over coffee,
That's crazy.
which changed the whole tone of the negotiation, leading to a successful merger.
So like a simple coffee break
Yeah,
framed strategically
Yeah.
became this turning point.
exactly.
It really shows like the power of those small steps.
In building momentum.
Yeah, it works in less formal settings too.
Okay.
Think of a Virgin Mary, a Bloody Mary without the vodka.
Okay.
A student wanted one, but the waitress said they couldn't do that.
Okay.
So the student broke it down incrementally.
Uh,
First, she asked if they had tomato juice.
okay.
The waitress said yes.
Uh,
Then she asked about Worcestershire sauce,
Mhm.
Tabasco ice, and so on.
oh my God.
And she got her drink.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't say no after a while.
Right.
It reminds us that staying calm and persistent, even when you're facing resistance, can be incredibly effective.
Exacto.
Okay, so we've talked about standards and incrementalism.
Right.
What about framing?
Framing is all about how you present information
Okay.
and the language you use to influence how the other party perceives the situation.
Okay.
Diamond is a master of using framing to shift that power dynamic and create a more favorable outcome.
I mean, we've seen this play out in like famous cases, right?
Yeah.
Like think about Obama's change campaign slogan or Johnny Cochran's, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit."
Exactly.
Like those simple phrases.
Huge impact.
Yeah, huge impact on like public perception.
And again, it's not about manipulation.
Right.
It's about understanding the psychology of persuasion
Mhm.
and using language strategically to highlight the aspects that will resonate most with the other party.
I imagine this takes a lot of practice and forethought.
Definitely.
It's not something you can just like pull out of thin air.
Diamond stresses the importance of preparation.
Yeah.
Before entering a negotiation, think about how you want to frame the issues.
Okay.
What language will be most persuasive?
Uh-huh.
What story do you want to tell?
Okay.
What outcome are you aiming for?
It's almost like directing a play.
Yeah,
You're setting the stage and like guiding the actors toward the desired outcome.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah, and one of his students provides a perfect example of this.
Okay.
She wanted a signing bonus from McKinsey,
Okay.
but was told they had this firm-wide policy of treating all incoming MBAs the same.
Okay. Yeah.
So she reframed the issue by asking, "When's the soonest you can pay a new hire?"
Clever.
They said 3 months.
Uh-huh.
And then she said, "Great, just pay me the bonus 3 months after I start."
Wow.
And they agreed.
She reframed their standard to meet her needs.
She did. That's brilliant.
It is.
Another student used framing when she was denied airline miles
Oh, yeah.
from American Express
Right.
because she was late on a payment.
Yeah.
And she framed it as, "Is American Express now saying that non-membership has its privileges?"
Ooh.
And she got her miles back.
Wow. She called out their hypocrisy,
She did.
and they had to back down.
But it's important to note that Diamond doesn't advocate for using framing to be deceptive or unethical.
Definitely not.
Right.
It's about finding a way to present the truth in a way that aligns with the other party's values and motivations.
Yeah.
Even in his personal life, Diamond uses framing effectively.
Really?
His wife wanted to get rid of their dog. And instead of arguing, he reframed the situation by asking questions that highlighted the dog's value,
Okay.
like providing security and companionship for their kids.
Right.
They kept the dog,
Oh, that's sweet.
all thanks to framing.
So it's about steering the conversation toward a mutually beneficial outcome.
Exactly.
It sounds like both framing and using standards depend on really understanding the other person's perspective.
Absolutely. You can't use these tools effectively unless you've taken the time to understand their needs, fears, motivations.
Right. So it all goes back to empathy,
Exactly.
which we talked about in a previous episode.
The more you understand the other party, the better you can leverage standards and framing to guide that negotiation toward an outcome that benefits everyone.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you said guide the negotiation, because it is about guiding. It's not about like forcing or,
Right.
being aggressive. It's about guiding towards a mutually beneficial outcome.
Exactly.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
It's clear that standards framing this incremental approach
Yeah.
can be really powerful tools. And the key takeaway is that it's not about being manipulative,
Yeah.
but rather strategic, thoughtful, and even empathetic in your approach.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And the more you practice these tools, the more naturally they'll come to you.
Right.
And the more successful you'll be in achieving your goals in any negotiation.
Well said. Now let's switch gears and talk about another fascinating concept Diamond introduces:
Okay.
trading items of unequal value.
Okay.
This one really challenges the traditional idea of a fair trade.
It does.
Yeah.
Diamond argues that what really matters is the subjective value each party places on different items.
So instead of focusing on what's objectively equal,
Yeah.
it's about finding those things that are perceived as more valuable by one side than the other.
Exactly. You can then leverage that difference to create a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
He gives this great example of a paper industry executive who was struggling to close this multi-million-dollar deal, and nothing seemed to be working.
What was the breakthrough? How did they finally close the deal?
They discovered that what the client truly valued were basketball tickets,
Right.
specifically tickets to the NBA Finals.
Oh my gosh, so something relatively insignificant to the company was like a huge deal for this client.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
And by providing those tickets, which probably didn't cost them much,
Right.
they secured this massive contract.
It's just such a good illustration of how uncovering those hidden desires can lead to such cool opportunities.
Absolutely. And these items of unequal value don't always have to be tangible things.
Right.
They can be intangible assets as well.
Like what?
Respect, recognition, even access to information.
So it could be like offering to connect someone with an influential person,
Exactly.
or sharing valuable insights you have access to.
Diamond mentions the CEO who solidified a long-standing business relationship by simply picking up his client's mother-in-law from the airport one Saturday night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great reminder that small acts of kindness
Yeah.
can have a surprisingly big impact.
It's all about understanding what the other party truly values.
Yeah.
And those things aren't always obvious.
And you wouldn't think like picking up someone's mother-in-law from the airport would be this like
I know.
business deal maker, but
It can be.
apparently it can be. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and Diamond also highlights that trading items of unequal value can actually make the other party less price sensitive.
Oh, interesting. So if you've already provided them with something they perceive as highly valuable,
Yeah,
they might be more willing to compromise on price.
precisely.
Okay.
This can be incredibly useful in those tougher negotiations.
Yeah.
He gives an example of a company that was able to maintain its pricing during a discounting cycle by offering its clients travel and office supply discounts through its superior contacts.
So they found a way to provide added value without lowering their prices.
Exactly.
That's smart.
It allowed them to stay competitive without impacting their profits.
Yeah.
Another great example involves a family trying to hire a live-in nanny. They were competing with another family that was offering double the salary.
Oh, wow. So how did they win over the nanny?
They discovered that the nanny was a single mother whose son had recovered from blood cancer.
Oh, wow.
So they offered her something money couldn't buy,
Yeah.
access to their network of medical professionals, and emphasized their family-oriented values.
Wow.
She ended up taking the job for half the salary offered by the other family.
Wow. Sometimes what people value most goes so far beyond money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this idea of trading in tangible assets is also crucial in family-owned businesses.
Okay.
Preserving the company legacy,
Right.
maintaining control,
Yeah.
or even securing jobs for family members
Uh-huh.
can often outweigh getting the highest price.
It's all about understanding those emotional drivers and addressing them creatively.
Exactly. Those intangible factors can be equally important in, straightforward business deals, too.
Yeah.
Diamond talks about this aircraft leasing company that was trying to get airline seats back from Air Canada.
Okay.
Negotiations were stalled until they offered a round of golf at Pebble Beach.
Sometimes a simple perk for one side is a major incentive for the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Diamond really emphasizes the importance of those intangible assets.
Mm-hmm.
Things like brand reputation, employee loyalty, even a company's social responsibility can be incredibly valuable bargaining chips.
So it's not just about the bottom line.
Right.
It's about understanding the bigger picture
Yeah.
and finding creative solutions that address those less tangible needs.
That's it, exactly.
Okay.
And another point that Diamond makes that I found surprising
Okay.
is that the more items you have on the table in a negotiation,
Uh-huh.
the easier it can actually become.
Really? I always thought the opposite.
That's what we often assume.
Yeah.
But Diamond argues that more items create more opportunities
Right.
for trading those items of unequal value.
Right.
It gives you more flexibility to find a solution that works for everyone.
So instead of trying to narrow down the negotiation
Yeah.
to a single point,
Right.
it's actually better to expand the scope and bring in more options.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the emotional component of negotiation,
Right.
which Diamond explores in depth in another chapter of his masterclass.
That's so important because
Yeah.
emotions can run high in negotiations.
Yes.
And if they're not handled well,
It can completely derail the process.
totally.
Diamond stresses the importance of staying calm and rational,
Right.
even when the other side is getting emotional.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that outbursts often stem from people feeling unheard or treated unfairly.
So it's about addressing those underlying emotional needs, showing them that you understand where they're coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
He suggests using what he calls emotional payments.
Okay.
Things like sincere apologies,
Uh-huh.
acknowledging their perspective, or just actively listening to de-escalate the situation and rebuild trust.
It's about validating their feelings.
Yeah.
Even if you don't agree with their point of view.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So we've touched on standards, incrementalism framing,
Right.
trading items of unequal value, and the role of emotions.
Yeah.
It feels like Diamond is giving us a comprehensive toolkit for better negotiation.
He really is. And he actually provides this model for applying these tools strategically,
Okay.
the getting more model.
Okay.
It's divided into 4 quadrants.
Okay.
The first quadrant is all about analyzing the situation.
Okay.
You define your goals, pinpoint the problem you're trying to solve, consider everyone involved, and assess your walkaway options.
So it's like laying the groundwork and getting a clear picture before diving in.
Exactly. The second quadrant focuses on analyzing the other party's perspective.
Okay.
What are their needs?
Uh-huh.
How do they perceive the situation?
Okay.
What's their communication style?
Right.
Diamond emphasizes the importance of role reversal here, really trying to see things from their point of view.
So moving beyond your own assumptions and getting into their headspace.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the third quadrant focuses on generating options and reducing risk.
Okay.
This is where you brainstorm creative solutions,
Okay.
explore those trades of unequal value, and think about how to leverage third parties or even common enemies to your advantage.
So extending the pie and finding those win-win solutions we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And finally, the fourth quadrant is all about execution.
Okay.
How you'll present your proposal, secure commitments, and ensure follow-through.
So it's not enough to have a good idea.
Right.
You need a plan to make it happen.
Absolutely. And what's great about this model is it can be applied to any negotiation.
Yeah.
Personal disputes, big business deals, even everyday interactions.
It's like having a universal framework for those tricky conversations.
Yeah,
And getting what you want.
exactly.
That's so cool. It sounds like it takes a lot of prep to use it effectively, though.
It does. Diamond emphasizes that preparation is key to successful negotiation and suggests using the model to run through simulations beforehand.
So you rehearse the negotiation with a friend or colleague
Exactly.
to see how it might play out.
It's a chance to test your approach, anticipate challenges, and refine your strategy before you're actually facing the other party.
That's smart.
It's like a dress rehearsal for a big performance.
Yeah, and by going through this process, you can gain valuable insights into their likely responses
Absolutely.
and avoid making costly mistakes.
He shares an example of a lawyer at Yahoo who was struggling with an advertising client.
Okay, what happened?
Through the simulation, she realized that the real issue wasn't the content of the web page, but a lack of trust stemming from the beginning of the relationship.
Oh, so she was able to get to the root of the problem
Exactly.
and address those underlying concerns.
When she brought this understanding into the actual negotiation, the client was blown away thinking she was a mind reader.
Wow.
It completely shifted the dynamic, and they were able to find a solution that worked for both of them.
It's amazing how sometimes the real obstacles aren't what they seem on the surface.
Absolutely. And by taking the time to thoroughly prepare and understand the other party's perspective, you can identify those hidden roadblocks and map out a path to success.
It's about being proactive, strategic, and insightful. And what I find exciting is that these tools aren't just for CEOs or lawyers.
They're for everyone.
Yeah.
Whether you're negotiating a raise,
Yeah,
buying a car, or even getting your kids to do their homework,
that's true.
these techniques can help you navigate those tricky conversations and
Right.
get more of what you want.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate about Diamond's approach is his emphasis on the importance of ethics in negotiation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not about being manipulative or deceitful.
Right.
It's about finding win-win solutions that benefit everyone involved.
Definitely, Diamond believes that ethical negotiation is not only the right thing to do, but also the most effective long-term approach.
Right. It builds trust, strengthens relationships,
Exactly.
creates a more sustainable foundation for future interactions.
It's not about winning at all costs,
Yeah.
but finding those solutions where everyone feels good about the outcome.
And I think that's something that's really great about his approach.
I agree.
Yeah, Diamond also shares some interesting insights on how to handle situations where the other party might be using unethical tactics,
He does.
things like bribery or extortion.
Yes. And he offers practical advice on navigating those tricky situations without compromising your own values.
Okay, that's what we're going to dive into next.
We'll delve into that fascinating discussion after a quick break.
Awesome. I'm excited.
It's interesting because Diamond actually challenges that traditional view of what a bribe is. He says sometimes what looks like a bribe is really just like people not understanding each other.
Oh, so it's not always like intentional corruption,
Right.
but more like miscommunication.
Exactly. He tells this story about an Israeli economic official who was furious that building inspectors in a certain country were demanding bribes.
Okay.
And Diamond asked him, "Do you know why those inspectors are asking for bribes?"
I'm curious, what was the reason?
Diamond said because they don't know how to ask for a job.
Why?
Turns out the inspectors were actually looking for work
Oh, wow.
and saw bribes as a way to supplement their income.
That totally changes things.
Right.
It's like it highlights how important it is to understand what people really need
Absolutely.
before jumping to conclusions.
By understanding the inspector's true needs, they might have been able to find a more ethical solution
Yeah.
that benefited everyone.
Like offering job training or something.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
So sometimes what seems like an ethical dilemma can be solved with a little empathy and creative problem solving.
Totally. And Diamond also gives some advice for like job interview questions that can put you in a tough spot ethically.
Oh, yeah.
Like if they ask if you have other offers.
Right. He advises being truthful,
Okay.
but you don't have to reveal everything.
So it's about being honest, but also strategic.
Exactly. You want to highlight your value without giving away too much information.
Right. So what would you say if someone asked you about other offers?
You could say something like, "I have other opportunities I'm actively pursuing."
Okay, that acknowledges the question,
Yeah.
but doesn't give away too many details.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so Diamond is really good at thinking on his feet.
He is.
Doesn't he also tell a story about a student who used these principles to get out of a really dangerous situation?
Yes. One of the most powerful stories Diamond tells is about a student who was held up at gunpoint.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
It was a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
But the student stayed calm
Okay.
and even acknowledged the robber's authority.
What? How did he do that?
He said, "You're the boss."
Wow. I can't believe he said that.
I know, but it actually worked.
Really?
By appealing to the robber's sense of control,
Okay.
He de-escalated the situation,
Wow.
and the robber ended up giving back his driver's license and student ID.
That's incredible.
It shows how important emotional intelligence is in these situations.
Even when you're like literally facing a life or death scenario.
Exactly. You got to read the situation, understand their motivations,
Right.
and find a way to promote a peaceful resolution.
That's powerful. Okay, so understanding personal styles is important too, right?
Definitely, Diamond points out that sometimes the best negotiator isn't the most senior person,
Oh, really?
but the one whose style best fits the other party.
So it's about finding that right match.
Exactly.
The person who can connect and build rapport
Yeah.
and create that comfortable environment for negotiation.
You got it. And that might even mean putting aside your own ego
Right.
and realizing that someone else is better suited for the task.
That takes a lot of self-awareness.
It does.
But ultimately, it's about getting the best outcome,
Exactly.
even if you're not the one leading the charge.
Right.
I like that. And speaking of self-awareness, Diamond also shared this funny story about an executive who was told he came across as confrontational.
Oh, yeah. What was his reaction?
He immediately stood up and shouted, "What are you talking about? I'm a collaborative guy."
Oh, the irony.
I know, it's like he totally proved their point.
Exactly.
I guess we don't always see ourselves as others see us.
That's so true. We need to be open to feedback
Yeah.
and adapt our approach based on the situation and the
Yeah.
people we're dealing with.
It's about being flexible to get what you want.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the most surprising things Diamond said is that he advises against compromise.
Really? Isn't compromise supposed to be like the heart of negotiation?
That's what we're always told.
Right.
But Diamond says compromise can lead to bad outcomes,
Okay.
where no one really gets what they want.
So he's saying explore all other options first.
Yeah, like those trades we talked about.
Right.
Reframing the situation or bringing in third parties.
Exactly. Compromise should be the last resort.
Not the starting point.
Right.
Okay, so push for creative solutions
Yes.
that work for everyone.
That maximize value for everyone.
I love that perspective. It challenges us to think differently about negotiation
It does.
and be more ambitious about getting those win-win outcomes.
That's one of the most valuable lessons, I think,
Yeah.
from Diamond's work.
Totally.
He's empowering us to be confident and creative,
Uh-huh.
knowing we have all these tools to get what we want,
Right.
while also building strong relationships.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been so insightful.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of negotiation,
Yeah,
and I'm excited to try out these techniques.
me too. And remember, negotiation isn't just for CEOs or diplomats.
Right.
It's a skill we use every day
Yeah.
with everyone.
Totally.
So by mastering these techniques, we can all be better communicators,
Right.
better advocates for ourselves,
Yeah.
and more successful in general.
Absolutely. And on that note, if you want to learn more about Stuart Diamond's approach, we'll link to his book and website in the show notes.
And as a final thought, consider this. If you had to define one personal standard for how you want to be treated in negotiations,
Okay.
what would it be?
Hmm.
How would you communicate that to others?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
it's been my pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.
So Diamond also talks about how to deal with situations where like the other person is using unethical tactics.
Right, like bribery or extortion.
Yeah, like how do you handle that
Yeah.
without like compromising your own values?
Exactly.
He says the most important thing is to stay calm.
Okay, that makes sense, because if you're like freaking out,
Right.
you can't think straight.
You can't think strategically.
And it's important to remember that you always have options.
Right.
You don't have to just give in.
Exactly.
Especially if someone's trying to pressure you.
He suggests trying to understand why they're being unethical.
Okay, so like what's the motivation?
Yeah. Are they desperate? Do they not know any better? Or are they just trying to take advantage?
So if you can figure out why they're doing it,
Yeah.
it can help you respond better.
Exactly. Like if it's a misunderstanding, maybe you can just explain things.
Right, like educate them.
Yeah, like here's my company's policy or here's what I believe.
Or offer a different solution.
Exactly.
That's more ethical.
But if it's clear they're being shady on purpose, then you got to be firm.
Okay.
Set boundaries.
So you're not just letting them walk all over you.
Right. You say, look, this is not okay. I won't tolerate this.
You got to be assertive, but also professional.
It's a balance.
Yeah.
He also says it's really important to document everything.
Okay, so like keep records of all the interactions.
Yeah. Emails, calls, meetings.
So if you need to like get a lawyer involved, you have proof.
Exactly.
That's a good tip.
And ultimately, he says, talk to your own advisors.
Okay.
to get advice for your specific situation.
Yeah, because every situation is different.
Right.
Good to have someone to help you navigate.
Diamond gives us all these great tools.
Yeah, he does.
But it's important to remember that negotiation is a process.
Something you keep learning.
Exactly. You keep refining your approach as you go.
And always trying to improve.
And if you're committed to ethical negotiation,
Yeah,
I think you'll be so much more successful.
totally. This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of negotiation.
Me too.
And I'm excited to put these techniques into practice.
Remember, negotiation isn't just for like big business deals.
Right, it's everyday life.
Yeah, it's how we interact with everyone.
Totally.
So these skills can help us all be better communicators.
Yeah,
And get more of what we want in life.
absolutely. And for our listeners, if you want to learn more, we'll link to Stuart Diamond's book and masterclass in the show notes.
And as a final thought for you to consider,
Okay.
if you had to choose one standard for how you want to be treated in negotiations,
Uh-huh.
what would it be?
Hmm.
And how would you make sure people know about that standard?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.